When the July 20th, 1944 attempt to kill Hitler fell apart, a few hours after nearly blowing the Fuhrer to bits, the leader of the plot, Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg, and 3 other men were lined up against a wall in the Bendlerblock headquarters complex in Berlin and shot. As the firing squad aimed and fired, Stauffenberg's aide, Walther von Häften, jumped in front of his commanding officer, friend and co-conspirator, and took the bullet meant for Stauffenberg. This gave the colonel a moment to say his final words, "Long live sacred Germany," before he was killed. The man who brought Stauffenberg into the circle of anti-Hitler conspirators was General Henning von Tresckow, who had attempted to kill the Fuhrer with a bomb planted in the leader's plane. Cold temperatures prevented the fuse from working correctly, and von Tresckow worked with Stauffenberg on a new plan. When word that Hitler had survived the bombing at his headquarters in East Prussia, the Wolf's Lair, von Tresckow knew his life was over. Rather than be captured and tortured, as so many of the others involved in the plot were, the general, who had been transferred to the East Front before the plot began, walked out into the no man's land between German and Soviet forces and killed himself with a grenade. 3 heroes dying heroes' deaths. That begs the question, what happened when the leading Nazis sentenced in the Nuremberg trials went to their deaths? What did they say? What did they do? Though there were many trials and sentences passed down by the International Military Tribunal, IMT, after the leading Nazis were sentenced on October 1, 1946, the name Nuremberg trials is usually used to refer to just the highest-ranking Nazis that were captured during or after the war. Who were these 21 men? The highest-ranking Nazi was literally almost the highest-ranking Nazi, though by the end of the war, Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring's power and influence had taken a severe turn for the worse. However, until Hitler got word, an attempt by Göring to make peace with the Western Allies in the last days of the war, Göring was the number 2 man in Germany, at least after the bizarre flight our next Nazi took to England in 1940. Not only did Göring lead the Luftwaffe, which indiscriminately bombed cities from England to Ukraine, he was also chief of the Nazi 4-year plans, which included the use of slave labor to help support the German economy and build weapons, including V-1 and V-2 rockets. He also had detailed knowledge of the existence of the death camps, which he profited from, and his name was on many signed orders, which resulted in the deaths of millions. Unfortunately, Göring got help from a sympathetic U.S. guard, who, in return for Göring's watch, retrieved personal items for the former Reichsmarschall, including an item, likely a pen, that concealed a cyanide capsule that Göring took the night before his scheduled execution. Joachim von Ribbentrop was Nazi Germany's foreign minister throughout the Nazi era, and most people know the name from the infamous Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the non-aggression signed on August 23, 1939, that sealed the fate of Poland, and much else. Ribbentrop was involved, or in the know, about virtually every major Nazi crime, from aggressive war to crimes against humanity. Ribbentrop was the first of the Nazis hanged. Accounts of von Ribbentrop's death differ. Some people say he was quiet and scared, unable to speak. Others say that he quietly asked if he could speak, and said, "God protect Germany," as well as wishing for peace between East and West. But accounts differ. Likely some of the soldiers and the cleric on the scaffold heard something, and those there to watch, journalists, officials, etc., did not hear him, but will likely never know. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel was the chief of the Wehrmacht High Command, the OKW for Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. His signature was affixed to dozens of orders that led directly to war crimes. Keitel was an officer for nearly 40 years, remained stoic and calm as he was led to the gallows. His last words were, "I call on God Almighty to have mercy on the German people. More than 2 million German soldiers went to their death for the fatherland before me. I follow now my sons, all for Germany." Like some of the others, Keitel's head hit the hole in the scaffold floor as he was hanged. As with some of the others, especially Strichter, the executioner, Sergeant John C. Woods, botched the hanging, and Keitel was left to strangle for nearly half an hour before he died. Ernst Kaltenbrunner was an SS Obergruppenführer equivalent to an American lieutenant general, 3 stars. He had succeeded to some of the most powerful positions in Germany, including chief of the security police, including the Gestapo and the regular uniformed police, and head of the SS Nazi Foreign Intelligence Service, the dreaded SD, the Sicherheitsdienst, the security service. Kaltenbrunner was involved in so many war crimes and crimes against humanity, it's impossible to tell you about all of them in this short video. Kaltenbrunner was quiet as he went up the scaffold. Asked if he wanted to say any last words, he uttered, "Germany, good luck." Then he dropped through the floor. Alfred Rosenberg had been one of Hitler's favorites in the Nazi rise to power, and in the first part of the war before falling out of favor and into the sidelines. Nonetheless, Rosenberg is considered by many to be the philosophical inspiration of the Nazi movement, and was Hitler's confidant for some time. For much of the war, Rosenberg was Reich Minister for the occupied Eastern Territories, and in that role he was part of the decision-making processes that led to some of the worst crimes in human history. As with some other convicts, accounts of Rosenberg's last moments differ. Some say he was calm, others say he was intensely nervous. His last words were either, "Hail Germany," or "Long live Greater Germany," a reference to a dominant Germany. Professional Holocaust and World War II historians are quite aware of the name Hans Frank, but many average people with a passing interest in the war know next to nothing about him. Frank was a governor, essentially the ruler of the so-called General Government of Poland, covering the south-central part of the country, and was about the size of the U.S. state of Indiana. 5 of the 6 extermination camps, including Auschwitz, were located in the territory he governed. Frank was intimately familiar and played a major role in virtually all of the stages of the Holocaust, from deportation and resettlement in the ghettos to massacres and extermination. Frank apparently had a genuine conversion experience in prison and became a devout Catholic. He is said to have remained calm and asked the Polish people for forgiveness for his crimes. As a percentage of the population, Poland lost more than any other country in the war, and seeing that over 6 million people in Poland, half ethnic Poles and the other half Jewish, died during the war, most in territories governed by Frank, his request likely fell on deaf ears. Wilhelm Frick was a longtime Nazi and served as Reich Minister of the Interior from 1933 until he was replaced by the more powerful SS chief Heinrich Himmler in 1943. He then was a governor of Bohemia and Moravia, provinces in Czechoslovakia. Frick was involved in war crimes and crimes against humanity on a large scale. At his execution, Frick was agitated, but mostly calm. He said, "Long live Germany," and was hanged. Before World War II, Julius Streicher was one of the most recognizable Nazis. He was short, barrel-chested, wore a Hitler mustache, and was completely bald. For a time before and after the Nazis came to power, Streicher, along with the propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, who committed suicide in the Fuhrer bunker after Hitler had killed himself, was responsible for shaping public opinion and directing mass events in Germany. He did this through his notorious newspaper, Der Stürmer, meaning the stormtrooper or the attacker. The Stürmer published all types of pro-Nazi articles, but it was best known for its lurid and virtually pornographic descriptions of what the Nazis believed or wanted the German people to believe about what the Jews were up to in secret. Most of all, the sexual assault and seduction of pure German women and girls. Virtually none of it true. Streicher's paper also encouraged anti-Jewish hate on a massive scale, and was key in promoting and lauding events like the infamous anti-Jewish riots in 1938, Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass. Streicher was actually as disgusting as his paper, and was hated by many Germans, top Nazis included. Still, he played a huge role in creating the incredibly hateful atmosphere in Germany and was sentenced to death. In prison, Streicher, a man with rude manners and a grating personality, aside from the crude and hateful things that constantly poured from his mouth, was shunned by the other prisoners. When it was his time, he yelled out "Heil Hitler" as he mounted the scaffold steps. As the ropes went around his neck, he shouted "Purimfest," a reference to the Jewish holiday of Purim, which celebrated the ancient Jews' liberation from Persia and their persecution by a Persian official named Haman, who wanted the Persian king to kill all the Jews. Streicher's execution was bungled. The rope was not tied right, and the counterweight was not correct. The goal of most judicial hanging is for the spine to be broken at the neck. Streicher dropped and was slowly strangled. What a shame. Fritz Sauckel was responsible for labor mobilization, which meant he was in charge of the Nazi effort to seize workers from the countries they controlled. Some 12 million people, many of whom died from maltreatment, brutality, starvation, and overwork. Sauckel was sentenced to death. Sauckel's last words were the most defiant of the defendants hung that day. He is reported to have said, "I die innocent. My verdict is unjust. God protect Germany." But he wasn't. Paper documentation, his own statements during the war, and witness reports proved his guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt. General Oberst Alfred Jodl was the operational chief of the OKW, and like Field Marshal Keitel, ordered or signed off on many war crimes committed in the areas under German military control. The Nuremberg trials and subsequent research proved without a doubt that the German army committed war crimes on a large scale throughout the war, especially in the East, despite post-war apologists trying to blame every German war crime on the SS. Jodl was stoic as he mounted the scaffold. His last words were, "I ask forgiveness from the German people for having obeyed orders." SS Arthur Seyss-Inquart was also a relatively unknown person to most casual readers of World War II history, but among his positions was Deputy Governor of the General Government in Poland, Reichskommissar for the Netherlands, and Reichsminister without portfolio. In that position, he personally began ordering the deportation and ghettoization of Jews in Nazi-occupied Germany in 1939 and early 1940. As Reichskommissar of the Netherlands, he was responsible for the rounding up of Dutch Jews and their transport to the extermination camps, primarily Auschwitz. Accounts of Seyss-Inquart's demeanor also differ from account to account. His last words are thought to have been something along the lines of his believing he was doing the right thing for his country. The other 9 men sentenced in the main Nuremberg trial were given lengthy sentences, including Rudolf Hess, who is often confused with the longest-serving commander of Auschwitz, Rudolf Höss, who was Hitler's deputy Fuhrer of the Nazi Party from 1933 on. Often when you see a clip of Hitler speaking before the war, it's Hess who introduces him. Hess died alone in Spandau prison in 1987. At one time, the prisoner's governor was Ronald Spears, of Band of Brothers fame. The bodies of the Nazi leaders hung after the first round of the trials were cremated, some say at Dachau concentration camp, and scattered in the Isar River, so the graves would not become rallying points for any Nazis in the future. This has been History on Fleek. See you next time.